Hello, everybody. Welcome to Charting with Dan. It is Monday. It's time to go over the box office numbers. Roth Cornett is coming back from her overseas assignment. So
where she's not a spy.
Where she's definitely not a spy. And I am joined today by Mr. Billy Business.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thanks for joining me. It seems like a broken record at this point. I know a lot of people are like, why are you doing another box office video about Black Panther? Well, it's the #1 movie. Again, for the 5th week in a row. Let's take a look at the top 5. Black Panther dropped off 34, just under 35%, which is an amazing hold in week 5 for a movie. It remains at the top of the box office for the 5th consecutive week. It is the first movie since Avatar to achieve that feat. And actually, Black Panther and Avatar are the only 2 movies this century that have been able to have 5 consecutive weeks. Force Awakens didn't do it. No other 2 movies in the 21st century have spent 5 weeks at the top of the box office. However, it has a very long way to go to tie the record, which is Titanic. It had 15 consecutive weekends at the top of the box office. Avatar had 7. We'll talk at the end of the show about the odds, perhaps, of Black Panther making it the top of the box office for a 6th consecutive week. Roth predicted it correctly. She predicted Black Panther will remain at the top. I said that it would be overtaken by Tomb Raider. It was not overtaken by Tomb Raider. Black Panther, #1 yet again.
I mean,
what's left to say?
What can you say? I mean, people. The thing about this movie too is not just that a lot of people are seeing it. A lot of people are seeing it multiple times,
right?
Which is, the key to like a very successful movie is not getting a huge group of people to go once. It's getting that big group of people to go a ton of times.
That's what we were talking about with Infinity War. There's a lot of talk about the Infinity War pre-sales. It's making more in the pre-sale than Black Panther. Like, well, do you think it'll make more money? And listen, Last Jedi proved, and basically anything that Disney puts out right now proved that you can get a huge group of people to go out and see a movie on the first weekend. The legs, and we talk about it on this show all the time. I saw somebody said, drink every time you hear Dan say legs on the show. But that is really, for so many movies, what makes the difference is what are its legs?
Right.
What is its staying power? What is it, what kind of percentages can it keep holding up? That's what made Jumanji such a massive hit. That's what made The Greatest Showman such a big hit. That's what's making Black Panther such an incredible hit. And we're going to take a look at where it stands right now on the domestic chart. It's not just that it opens big. It's that it stays big. People go back, they see it again, or people that didn't go see it are hearing from people that did, hey, you've got to go see this movie. It's great. So Black Panther is having amazing legs for a blockbuster movie. These things usually drop 50, 60% in the first weekend. Black Panther's not doing that. As a matter of fact, it's holding strong. It has become the 7th movie to pass the $600 million mark domestically.
Wow.
Through 31 days. It's been out for 31 days. Hard to believe, a full calendar month. 31 days it's been out. It is currently out-earning every movie in the domestic top 10 at this point in its run, except for The Force Awakens, meaning the amount of money that Black Panther has made after 31 days is more than every other movie in the domestic top 10, except for The Force Awakens, which had a vastly larger number after 31 days than Black Panther did. As a matter of fact, I want to look at the current top 5 highest-grossing domestic films, because this will be the last time you see this particular lineup.
Wow.
Black Panther is going to overtake the Avengers domestically this week to become the top earning comic book movie of all time. It is going to break into the top 5 domestic grossers of all time. Avengers will be gone. It had a good 6-year run, give or take. And Black Panther actually has a very legitimate shot with the legs that it's displaying to overtake Titanic for that #3 spot, bumping Jurassic World and Titanic down to 4 and 5. Of course, these are not adjusted for inflation. It doesn't matter. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. It's going to be in the top 5. We'll see how Infinity War does. But again, as you can see, like the Avengers is the only one of the Marvel movies, or even DC, any comic book movies, to be in that top 5. It just goes to show you, top 5 isn't just a movie that made a lot of money. Top 5 are these movies that display staying power, that really connect with people, that become phenomena in their own rights, and that is what Black Panther is, and that is what it's become.
I mean, when you look at that top 5, look, for better or for worse, all 5 of those movies are just like in the pop culture lexicon.
Yep.
And Black Panther, absolutely. At this point, you can't deny the power of Black Panther and what it's done. To be the 18th movie in a series of movies, the second movie for this character, technically, since he was in Civil War.
Appeared in, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah. Let's look at the rest of the top 5. Tomb Raider, which is the movie that I predicted wrongly would open at number 1, comes in about $3 million off the opening. It opened at $23 million. That is the 8th best opening for a video game adaptation here in the U.S. That is way ahead of Assassin's Creed, which opened at $10 million a couple of years ago. It's about on par with the opening of Warcraft, although Warcraft had a bigger budget. It did take the global crown this weekend. So Tomb Raider made the most money internationally of anything else out there. It collected about $84 million. It opened in a few markets last weekend. Collected about $84 million this weekend, including a $41 million opening in China. Black Panther, you see this with so many releases in China where they have a huge opening and then they plummet 60, 70, 80% in weekend 2 because the Chinese film market is inundated. I mean, we saw with Operation Red Sea and Detective Chinatown, sometimes Monster Hunt 2, you see these huge films, sometimes 2 or 3 opening every weekend. So the way that the Chinese box office works so often is that a film will come in and make a huge amount of money in the first weekend and then plummet in the second weekend because another movie, like for example Tomb Raider, which took in $41 million this weekend, will come in and take that spot and then that'll plummet. And it's just like you have to make that money quick in China because it's not like you see sometimes here in the U.S. If a movie does do that in China where it has staying power, that is, again, the hallmark of a phenomenally successful movie. So Tomb Raider takes the global crown for this weekend. It's got a budget of about $100 million, so if its international grosses stay strong, it could turn a profit, potentially. We'll see. Again, it's a very crowded marketplace. We're getting now into, Pacific Rim is a movie that is opening day and date almost globally next weekend.
Right.
So it's going to be tough for a lot of these movies to really earn that traction because so many big movies are now escalating and starting to come out. So we'll see how Tomb Raider does internationally. Domestically, it had an okay cinema score, not great. Again, for a movie like Tomb Raider, which should kind of be a catch-all. So not a slam dunk, not what people were hoping for the video game genre, which is like, this is the movie that's going to change it all.
Right.
Nope, but they've got Rampage.
Then again, on paper, if I'm an exec, this is exactly where I would have put Tomb Raider because I'm like, okay, it's not quite summer yet, but I don't think anyone anticipated that Black Panther would have been as strong as it was. So
it's steamrolling.
I don't fault their strategy, just kind of the luck of the draw on this one.
Well, the reviews weren't good either. Like I said, the audience response was okay. It wasn't great. Right. So it's also the case of a movie that just didn't motivate people to jump out of their seats and go see it. Rampage opens on April 13th. That will be the next great hope for the video game. Oh boy!
Help us, Dwayne Johnson.
Help us,
your only hope.
Yeah. Oh, that looks like an interesting movie. Okay, let's take a look at the surprise movie of the weekend. Looking at the top 5 is I Can Only Imagine, which we mentioned very briefly at the end of last week's show. It opens at number 3, $17 million on just 1,600 screens, the best per screen average of any wide release this weekend. It's aimed at a Christian audience. It's the story of a very popular Christian song. These movies, you see faith-based movies, are literally, it's feast or famine at the box office.
Right.
This was a movie that was pegged to open, some people saying in the low single digits, and it opens at $17 million. And it seems like there's no in between. They're either so niche that the very little box office is expected, or they blow up like this movie and surprise everybody. There's been movies like War Room and Heaven is for Real, Miracles from Heaven, that have just been movies that really exploded. Passion of the Christ, obviously.
God's Not Dead was a big one.
God's Not Dead is a big one.
Yeah.
There's another, I think the third one of those movies is coming out in a couple of weeks. So I Can Only Imagine, really over-indexing, great per-screen average. And if you're looking at the final gross, again, these movies are historically very hard to track. It's kind of like what we're talking about Black Panther, is when there's a movie that's clicking with an audience, you can't market, or you can't track enthusiasm.
Right.
So a movie like I Can Only Imagine, historically, the final gross in this thing could be anywhere from $50 to $100 million. It's going to probably expand this weekend. We have the Easter holiday coming up. You could see church groups. You could see the core audience that this movie is aimed at really continue to come out in droves. Or it could be that the main audience came out this weekend and you're going to see diminishing returns. Again, hard to track enthusiasm, but it had an A+ cinema score. That indicates phenomenal word of mouth. That means that the audience that went to see this movie loved it and is going to be recommending it. So this is one that Hard to chart in advance where it's going to go, but it could be one that surprises people as far as the final gross, because we could be here sitting next week talking about a drop off of less than 50%.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends too on like those. A lot of these rely on like church screenings where they'll bus people to theaters to go see it. So yeah, with Easter coming up next weekend, you never know.
You never know. Another movie that got an A+ cinema score, but actually opened lower than expected in 5th place was Love, Simon, a movie that I loved quite a bit. It opened to $11.7 million. Greg Berlanti directed this movie. It's the first studio comedy with a gay protagonist. Again, word of mouth. The audience that went to see this movie gave it an A+. That indicates that it could do well, that you could continue to see people coming in. But again, as with any of these movies, with I Can Only Imagine, with Love, Simon, with these kind of movies that are reliant on word of mouth and on people going to see them in successive weekends, the problem is you have so many big movies now starting to hit. We're at a point now almost every weekend leading up into the summer. Hopefully there's enough room in the marketplace for that. It's very possible that there is. We've seen Game Night and Peter Rabbit, which are two movies that are out of the top 10 this week, but dropped less than 30% this weekend. Even with Black Panther dominating this market, we've seen these movies do 4 or 5 times their openings in a very busy, saturated market. So it is possible for smaller films like these to thrive, but it's very hard to predict if and when they will.
Yeah, definitely. And, I've heard good things about Love, Simon. This could be one, especially because it's not necessarily a message movie. It's just a teen movie with a gay protagonist. This could be one that, people find a little bit later on.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. 4th place, A Wrinkle in Time, dropped 50% from a weekend that probably wasn't where Disney would have wanted it. It's having some overseas struggles so far, but it has a lot of major markets left to go, but it is in 4th place, still in the top 5, but kind of hanging in there, $16.2 million. Not the hit that they were looking for, not with the way that this movie was budgeted.
Sure.
I actually did finally see it. I was catching up on movies this weekend. I did see it this weekend, and I can see why it's having a little difficulty finding an audience, because it's an odd movie. It's a very strange film. I thought that there were definitely some screenplay issues. I have not read the book, but I've heard from people that have read the book that the book is a very odd read. That it would be very difficult to adapt.
Very tough to adapt. Yeah. It's very surprising when these things comes out, or maybe not surprising. You hear like, oh, this book's unfilmable, and then a movie comes out and it doesn't do quite as well. It's like, well, you kind of it's just the source material is tough to do.
I think that Disney and the studio committed to a very specific vision from Ava DuVernay, and it's a tough sell.
Yeah,
it's a very tough sell. So I think that they were maybe hoping that the brand name, that the stars, and maybe that, again, you can never determine ahead of time what's going to click with an audience or not. But I think there's a lot of factors that are probably keeping this from being the success that they want it to be. It's not doing great here. We'll see as it rolls out into other international markets how it does. But so far it's been a bit of a struggle. So it looks like this could be a rare a red mark on Disney's ledger.
I think they can afford it.
I think they can afford it. I think they can. Let's look. Speaking of Reds, let's look at the top per screen. And for the second weekend in a row, it's The Death of Stalin, the Armando Iannucci political farce / comedy / history drama-esque type thing. I saw it. It's a very strange movie, but I laughed a lot. It takes the top per screen again this week. It expanded to 32 screens at $16,797 per screen. So again, limited release, taking the per screen spot. As I mentioned before, I Can Only Imagine took the per screen for wide releases at about $10,000 per screen. But Death of Stalin hanging in there as a limited release for the second week in a row. You don't see that very often.
Yeah, well, at least people are going to the theater and not just waiting for Netflix. If it's a good movie or people are talking about it, people still want to go see it.
Exactly. Let's take a look at the domestic box office chart for the year. Not much movement. Peter Rabbit passed the $100 million mark. It is up to number 2 for the year. It jumped over 50 Shades Freed. What a weird pairing that is. Wrinkle in Time debuts on the chart at number 5. I mentioned Game Night. That movie opened at about $17 million, and it's already up over 50. It's been holding really well. It's an R-rated comedy. again, it just goes to show you that there's some movies that, Peter Rabbit opened at 25 million. It's made 4 times its opening. So sometimes you just got to hope that movies find their audience and leg it out. They've had the room to do so. We'll see if other movies have that same room as the marketplace gets even more crowded. The Commuter, sorry, Liam Neeson, drops out of the top 10. Fare thee well. Good night, sweet prince. There was some unfinished business, though, that I wanted to point out from 2017, from last year's domestic box office, because we mentioned earlier Jumanji, such a big hit last year. It passed a couple milestones that I wanted to point out. Number one, it passed the $400 million mark and jumped over Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It is now, will go down as the 4th biggest movie at the domestic box office in 2017. So congrats,
Wow.
Jumanji.
Never saw that coming.
No, I mean that was that and The Greatest Showman. When you look at, we're getting close to the end of the first 3 months of the year. Jumanji, The Greatest Showman, obviously Black Panther. 3 movies that kind of show the power of being able to not only open well, or in the case of Greatest Showman, not open well.
Yeah.
How, if you connect to an audience, you can really reap those rewards. And in a business that's so driven by what's the number for the opening weekend, what's the number for the opening weekend. One of the reasons why I always kind of encourage not to write the story on a movie based off of the opening weekend is there's so much of the ball game left to be played. The opening weekend is maybe the first 3 innings of the ball game. You've got 6 more. Maybe they suck. Maybe it's a blowout. You never know. But I made the mistake of writing the story on a movie based off its opening weekend, and you just never know. You never know how a movie's going to hold. You never know what portion of the audience has yet to find it. So Jumanji, another one that $400 million. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You opened against The Last Jedi, and you ended up $400 million, number 4 movie in the U.S. for the year. Not bad.
Only The Rock.
Only The Rock and Kevin Hart and Jack Black.
And Karen
Gillan. They were all 4 great. I hope
Jonas.
the sequel. And Jonas.
You know what? All of them.
Oh, Jonas. All of them. They were all great. I hope they get them all back for the sequel, because that was a great mix of the cast.
Definitely.
Great. Let's look at the 2018 worldwide box office. Black Panther still on top. We're going to talk about one milestone that it passed. Operation Red Sea, Detective Chinatown, pretty much the same. Tomb Raider, we were talking about the global gross, even though it opened to about less than $25 million here in the U.S. It's made 128 plus worldwide. We'll see how that tracks going forward. It's opened in a lot of markets. It's got a few left, but we'll see what kind of legs it has, how much it develops, if it can make back that budget. But it's probably not going to be a smash hit unless something crazy happens globally and it connects really big in a market in the next few weeks. The Monkey King 3, unfortunately, gets knocked out by Tomb Raider. So sorry, Monkey King, you have been knocked out. There will probably be another entry on this list next week, because Pacific Rim Uprising opens day and date in almost every major market worldwide this weekend. So unless it is kind of a spectacular failure, if it grosses over $100 million or so, you're probably going to see it break onto that chart. We'll see how it does in China. We'll see how it does here in the U.S., which we'll talk about here in a second. But speaking of worldwide numbers, there's one more Black Panther factoid to note, which is that it passed Captain America Civil War on the worldwide box office list this past weekend. It is now the 4th highest grossing MCU movie worldwide. It's going to pass Iron Man 3, and more than likely, barring a huge resurgence somewhere, it's going to settle into that 3 spot behind the 2 Avengers films. Not bad company for it to have a first solo movie behind the 2 Avengers team-up movies, phase capping entries. Not too shabby. So let's talk about this week. We're talking about crowded marketplaces. We have Pacific Rim Uprising. That's opening almost everywhere in the world. Here it's opening in over 3,500 theaters. Sherlock Gnomes also opening here in over 3,500 theaters. It's counter-programming. Open Road has a romance movie called Midnight Sun. That's opening on over 2,000 screens. There's another religious theme film, Paul, Apostle of Christ, with Jim Caviezel. I guess he's going to make the whole Bible. because he was also in Passion of the Christ.
Is this like an MCU? Like, is it connected to Passion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, but it's opening on over 1,400 screens. Steven Soderbergh has a movie out coming called Unsane. It's his latest movie. I guess he unretired. I thought he was still retired, but he's got another movie.
He unretired his unretirement of Logan Lucky, which was his retirement.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, now he's unretired again for Unsane. That's getting a wide release. Isle of Dogs, which is Wes Anderson's latest movie, that is not opening wide, is opening in limited release on 27 screens this weekend, but it will be opening wide in the next few weeks. So the big question now, the question we've asked the last 2 weeks with first A Wrinkle in Time and then Tomb Raider is, will Pacific Rim Uprising, it is the latest entry into the will it top Black Panther or not contest. It's actually a little closer than I think Pacific Rim would like for it to be. Pacific Rim is tracking right now at about $20 to $30 million. The reviews are not out yet, so that could have an impact. Black Panther, if it falls at about, let's just say it falls 30%, that puts it at around $14, $15 million. So I think that there is a possibility, if the reviews are not great on Pacific Rim, and it hits the low end of its tracking, which a lot of movies have done. Red Sparrow came in under its tracking. Wrinkle in Time came in under its tracking. Tomb Raider came in a little bit under its tracking. If Pacific Rim Uprising comes in under its tracking and Black Panther exceeds expectations, which it has done many times before, you could see a very, very close battle for the #1 spot. I'm not going to predict it because I've been wrong every time.
I'll predict it.
It's going to be close, but what do you think, Billy?
I think Pacific Rim will take it, but I think it's going to be very close, like within a 5 million margin. That's my prediction.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not that close, but that's all right.
I think that's close. Okay, fine. I'll lower it to 3 million within a 3
All
million
right.
margin.
3 million. I was just trying to pin you down. It's
But there you go.
There you
I
go.
think I think 30.
You think we have a new king of the box office next week?
Yes, I think Pacific Rim's going to do like 27 to 30, somewhere in there.
All right, upper end of the tracking.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Billy Business. He knows the business. That's why we have him on the show.
I have to.
You heard it here first. Billy Business says that Pacific Rim will be the new #1 next week. I am refusing to answer because I've already looked stupid 2 weeks in a row. So I'm just not going to say anything. Billy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, man. This is fascinating stuff.
It's fun stuff. I love looking at numbers. Do you love looking at numbers? I hope you do. Thanks so much for watching this week's Charting with Dan. Be sure to check out so many other cool things here on Screen Junkies News. We have our daily show, SJU. I'm crunching numbers on Disney movies and comic book movies over the last couple weekends. We just launched Pacific Rim. We just launched Pacific Rim Pup Rising over on Screen Junkies Main. Anything you want to plug coming up, Billy?
Just watch SJU every day because I can't describe in tweets how weird and how crazy and unpredictable it gets.
It's very strange. Thank you for watching. I'm also very strange. I'm Dan Murrell, Billy Business. We'll see you next week.